of Education, Special Education Division, and the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, we'd like to welcome you to the first in a series of 7 weekly webinars focused on secondary transition and presented by members of the California Transition Alliance leadership team. My name is Kevin Schaefer, Director of Program Support with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of El Dorado County. Also with us today, Kristen Brooks, Executive Director of the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of Riverside County. Next slide. The SIP project provides support to LEAs across California to increase inclusive opportunities and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. For more information on the project and to stay current on events throughout the state, you can visit our website at www.sipinclusion.org or join us on Facebook and Twitter at SIPinclusion. A Padlet has been also developed for future access to resources and registration that we'll address in a moment. Next slide. We've included the registration link for you here, including a Spanish version on the Padlet for all upcoming webinars for sharing with staff and families. For your convenience, we've muted all participants today, but please utilize the chat box for questions and clarifications. Just be aware when using the chat that you are responding to all panelists and attendees. We'll do our best to address your needs. Just know that if we are unable to answer live, there will be a Q&A sheet created and posted on the Padlet for each webinar. Additionally, our team will be adding links to the chat box as we understand they are difficult to copy from the slides. Next slide. For this presentation and those scheduled over the next 7 weeks, we've created a Padlet of resources for you to access. Simply click on the resource you're interested in and download as directed. The first column contains overarching resources, while each subsequent column contains resources specific to each webinar topic. To access the Padlet, which will continue to be updated, you simply need to have the web address and feel free to share it with colleagues and families. Next slide. We are grateful for this unique opportunity with Sue and her team of experts. Please remember to take care of yourselves and those you love. I will hand it over to Sue Sawyer, who will introduce her team presenting the transition landscape. Thank you all for being here with us.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I want to thank the California Department of Education and the SIP team for facilitating this. We have 3 presenters from the Alliance. I will kick it off with kind of the landscape, and Liz Zastro from Lodi Unified School District will talk about when to start transition, and Vicki Shad, who is currently with CSU Chico, will talk about what the student role in transition is all about. Next slide. Okay, we're doing the poll. So we would like to know who is participating today. Please click on the appropriate response and then we'll take a look at the results. We'll give you a minute or 2.
And if your role isn't listed in the poll, go ahead and enter it in the chat.
Okay, it looks like we have quite a bit of agency representation, predominantly educators and post-secondary education and family. Thank you all for participating. On the next poll, we're asking for what level of knowledge of transition. Do we have the results of that?
People are still voting, so give them just a sec.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you for voting. I want to clarify that we are going through this today, and then we're going to go through each element of transition. If you need further clarification or you have more questions and would like to contact us directly, you can through the catransitionalliance.org website. So we will follow up if you do respond. Okay. All right. I'm Sue Sawyer. I'm with the California Transition Alliance. The Alliance was formed in 2005 as a nonprofit organization, and our goal was to provide support and resources to youth and youth-serving professionals who support youth as they transition from high school to adulthood. Next slide. We accomplished this goal through creating resources and tools, providing workshops, hosting statewide institutes, collaboration with state and national partners. We lead different work groups. I lead the work group on the high school diploma issues. Richard Rosenberg leads the Social Security work group. And we play a leadership role on the California Community of Practice on secondary transition. I want to take just a few minutes to talk about the Secondary Transition Planning, the Basics Resource Guide. And as you look at the guide, there's a picture on the cover. And the picture is of a young child looking down a road towards her future. And there are 3 words on that resource. What has happened is that I was doing a lot of career guidance and counseling for a lot of different student groups. And I came to the conclusion that there has to be 3 elements in existence for the student in order to be able to set goals for their future. And the first one is hope. There has to be a sense of optimism about their future. They have to believe there's something out there for them. The second one is confidence. They have to have confidence that they have skills and abilities and they can do something. And the third one is trust. And when we talk about trust, we're talking about trust that they have adult allies that support them, trust in resources if they need financial aid or transportation, or even trust that they have food, clothing, and shelter. If any of those 3 variables are lacking, they struggle with answering that question, what do you plan to do in your future? If I don't have a sense of hope, I don't see anything out there for me, why would I develop a plan? If I don't have any confidence in myself, why would I set a goal for myself? Why would I take the risk of being able to believe in myself? And if I have hope and confidence, but I don't think the resources are there, then why would I bother to set a plan? So sometimes when you encounter youth who struggle with answering the question, what do you plan to do? It could be one of these 3 variables that are affecting them. Next slide. Our goal for this series is to explore each element of transition and then culminate with how that fits into the IEP. We will explore legislation, horizon issues, and youth-centered planning. And we know that the elements of transition in the IEP include developing post-secondary goals and reviewing them annually, providing age-appropriate assessments, listing transition services that include the course of study, writing annual goals that relate to the post-secondary goals, inviting the students to the IEP and engaging parents as part of an IEP team, and collaborating with agencies that will provide support after high school. But transition is a process, it's not a document. So while we will explore these mandates of IDEA around transition, we are really excited about sharing strategies and resources that lead to students being prepared for life after school. The transition landscape, today we're going to really focus on what the landscape of transition is, what the legislation tells us and where we're headed, when to start the transition process, and the role of the student in transition. Next slide. I started writing the book in 2013, and I updated it in 2020. And I'd like to take a minute or two just to reflect on the progress we have made in the state of California pertaining to transition. In 2013, we really focused on the professionals creating plans for youth. This is what you need to do. Or providing a menu of services and saying, of these things, which one do you want to do? In 2020, we're focused on person-centered plans, which ask the question, what is your plan and what help do you need and what support do you need? In 2013, we were really working in silos. Silos in school where we had instruction happening in special ed and students with limited participation in general ed. And now we know the value and the importance of inclusion in general ed and considering that student somebody who is a general ed student first with special ed providing support. We also had agencies that were kind of in silos, and the expectation was that you would transition support to the agency right at the end of the high school or the school experience. And now we're doing a lot of collaboration and we're starting much earlier. In 2013, it was okay to have watered down expectations for some students. Now we know how critically important having academic standards and providing every student the opportunity to learn is. In 2013, it was reasonable to start at age 16. Now we realize in 2020 that there is so much work to do in the area of transition that it's a good idea to start at preschool or before. If you wait till 16, you're probably about 15 years too late. In 2013, the students with intellectual and developmental disabilities were focusing on sheltered work and a supported life. Now we're encouraging them to go to work in competitive and integrated employment opportunities and to take charge of planning their life. In 2013, we had the certificate of completion for some students, and it was not just students with IEPs, it was other students who struggle in school. And now our real focus is everybody should have a diploma and go to college, or go to work, or go to post-secondary training. In 2013, we begged employers for work experience. Today, we have industries that have created human resources departments, and within those departments have the inclusive workforce initiative. And there are lots of information about that that we'll share at a different time. In 2013, we were figuring out how to provide accommodations to students. Today, accessibility is universally designed and built into technology on our phones, on our tablets, and on our computers. In 2013, the focus was for K-12 education was let's graduate with a diploma and let's transition to college and university. Now the focus is workforce preparation. From pre-K through K-12, for the pre-K to grade 12, to colleges and careers. So we have put an umbrella over everything that says workforce preparation is critical. Next slide. Why is transition so important? Well, let's take a look at what the data tells us. March 2020, disability employment statistics for students ages 16 and over. The difference in the labor force participation rate, which has changed a little bit with the virus going on, but in March 2020, only 21% of people with disabilities who were 16 and older were part of the labor force. But people without disabilities total 68%. In 2019, the California high school graduation rate for all students was 86%, and students with disabilities, it was 70%. The Department of Education National Center on Educational Statistics tell us that students without disabilities who enter college totaled 80% in 2017, but students with IEPs who transition to enter college total 19%. And 25% of individuals with disabilities live in poverty. Next slide, please. So what else does this tell us? When you don't have a diploma, there are only a few jobs that are available to you. So on this chart, the Bloomberg developed a report called Find Out If Your Job Will Be Automated. And when you go on the report and start going through this, you'll find out, you can find out in your local area using your zip code, which ones are in jeopardy. But on the left-hand column, the best paid, least vulnerable to automation are listed, and down to the lowest paid, least vulnerable. On the right-hand side is the best paid, most vulnerable, down to the low paid, most vulnerable. That cluster of red down at the bottom are the most of the jobs available to youth who lack a diploma. So as we work to help students make successful transitions, we need to give serious consideration as to the job outlook and how much they're going to earn. And we need to help them find ways to develop certifications and other tools to be able to enter careers that are not going to be obsolete in 2 to 5 years and or pay a living wage. Next slide, please. I think there's something of an amazing thing that happened between 2014 to 2018 having to do with legislation. The legislation that has to do with transition includes the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Perkins 5, which is the Career Technical Education Act, the Workforce Investment Act, and IDEA. And what we're finding is that all of these acts have this overriding thing that the final destination for everybody is work. We want students to go to post-secondary education and training, but it's now considered preparation for ultimately ending up being an earner or a worker. And there is embedded in all of this are importance of career development, inclusive environments, work-based learning opportunities, strong academic standards, soft skills, and work experience and employment. So it's kind of amazing that legislation has all coalesced around some common goals. The little icon on the screen that looks like a piece of paper with a number in it actually references the page that the graphic is in the book, Transition Planning, the Basics. Next slide. Yes.
So we put the link to the Transition Basics resource in the chat for anyone to access.
Great. Terrific. It's really important when you're working with youth to think about the fact that not only are they a student with a disability, but they're part of the Generation Z. They're considered post-millennials, they're emerging adults. And that population really looks positively at the concept of diversity. They're digital natives. They've never been without technology. They spend up to 10 hours a day using technology. They're entrepreneurial in spirit. 72% want to start their own business. They're concerned. They're worried about the future, and they're worried about the health of the planet. And they're passionate. They're willing to get out there and volunteer. They're willing to educate families on issues. 23% boycott an activity or a company based on that passion. The interesting thing about Gen Z and the next generation to come is we don't know anything about how they're going to be as adults because most of them are still in school. And so this category of group is called the post-millennials. It's those students who were born after 2002 and are still in school. And we're going to learn about what they're like as adults. The other issue is they're emerging adults. And the emerging adults are people who kind of delay achieving those adult milestones, which are things like finishing school, entering a career, financial independence, living independently, and participating as a family member. And those things used to happen by 23 to 25, and now it's closer to 35 years of age. So it's a different population in school, and we need to acknowledge that some things happen and it's not because of the disability. Next slide. Students with disabilities are well represented in the control funding formulas. Of all students, 11% are students with IEPs. Among those students that are homeless, 12% are students with IEPs. Among the students that are English learners, 16% are students with IEPs. Of those students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, 12% have IEPs. And among foster youth, 25% of those students have IEPs. And we know that many of these individuals also have a different path to a high school diploma, and we'll explore that when we get to the high school diploma webinar. Next slide. The National Technical Assistance Center on Secondary Transition has been doing extensive research. And through that research, we have learned what services lead to outcomes in employment, post-secondary education, and training and independent living. And what they tell us that if we can engage students inclusively in general education, if we can offer them opportunities for paid employment while they're in high school, if they have the opportunity to participate in work experience, in apprenticeship programs or internships, or get certifications, and if they have high parental expectations, student support, and they have what's called self-realization, and that is a knowledge of your own strengths, which goes back to building confidence, and support needs, that the students have a more likely chance of achieving post-secondary outcomes in all three categories that we look at outcomes. Next slide, please. For those students, or for those services that lead to employment and post-secondary education and training, the research tells us that it's essential that they have social skills training, that we work together with interagency collaboration, that they have career development and career awareness opportunities, that they are encouraged to participate in career technical education, that they're trained on how to set goals, that again, they're included in general education, that we teach them self-determination and self-advocacy skills, and that they have opportunities for paid employment. And these are the kinds of things that we can do while they're in school that will ultimately help them be prepared for education and post-secondary education and training. At the bottom of the screen, there's a chart that says Pre-Employment Transition Services, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And they're the 5 elements of transition services: workplace readiness training, counseling on post-secondary education, job exploration training, self-advocacy, and work-based learning. Again, you see a high correlation between the research that has been done with students in the K-12 system with what pre-employment transition services are critical when you look at workforce preparation. Next slide, please. The lack of a diploma is a barrier to post-secondary education and employment. The diploma is actually a ticket. It's a ticket to work, because 90% of employers prefer to hire youth with a diploma. 30% of jobs are low-skilled and susceptible to automation. 66% of jobs require a diploma and post-secondary education and training. So if students go online and try to meet the job requirements and complete an online application, when it says, do you have a diploma, and the answer is no, then you lack the opportunity of even competing for that job. The other area where the diploma is critical is it's also a ticket to post-secondary education and training. Colleges, universities, and apprenticeship programs frequently have the criteria to include a high school diploma. FAFSA eligibility requires a high school diploma. The only exception to this is if you are a student with a significant intellectual disability and you plan to transfer from the K-12 system to a program on a college or university that is designed to meet your needs, like the college to career programs or the Think College programs, you do not have to have a high school diploma to be eligible for financial aid. Next slide. Quick quiz. When do we make the decision to put students on a diploma track or a non-diploma track? Enter the response in the chat. Okay, it looks like we have a wide array of responses. The actual answer is by 3rd grade. When we start getting the test scores that indicate they're going to struggle academically, sometimes we take them off that academic track. So next slide, please. So this is what happens. They get off the academic track. They struggle to be able to survive in middle school. They lack the skill sets for the foundation for high school, but we expect them to go to post-secondary education and training, and we expect them to become a career employed or in a career or an earner. And so some of the students really who lack the academic foundation lack the skills to make it all the rest of the way. And you can see that they kind of take off. Sometimes they drop out of school. Sometimes they struggle to get the diploma. So it's really important. This just really reinforces how critical it is to have inclusive education and really talk about academics, academic standards. Next slide. We're going to show this video called Busting Myths.
Okay, so we're here today. We're going to create a series of PSAs about busting myths on people with disabilities. One of the biggest myths out there, I feel, is that all disabled are mentally indeficient. Some of the kids with disabilities, like me, can't hide that. They're there for the whole world to see.
For a lot of people, when they see us with a disability, especially with a physical disability, they think that we have limitations, right? And in some ways, we do have limitations. For myself, I can do a few things better than a lot of people, and I can do a few things worse than a lot of people, right? Just like anyone else.
Well, like I was thinking that people with disabilities, mental disabilities, physical disabilities, that they'll never be able to do what a regular person can do. Because that's the one thing that everybody's always dealt with throughout their whole lives. They've always had experiences where somebody's going to tell you, oh, you're not good enough for this, you can't do that, you won't be able, you're not mentally able to do something. Right now, you see people in the disabled Olympics running with the mechanical feet, and they run 100 meters or even more sometimes.
I would say that another myth is people only without disabilities go to college.
like people don't think you could achieve it. Like they'll just think you'll just not being on their own. I always wanted to go to college, but I've always heard that people with disabilities don't go to college. Like students like with me, like they didn't really seem to care like what I, like if you were going to go to college or not. They like praise more the AP students kind of. In the second grade, I had a teacher who told me that I should be institutionalized because she thought I was never going to make it. It was just going to get harder and harder and harder. But my 3.57 GPA, I think it's proved that one out.
I remember years I would be asking my mom, do you think I'll ever drive? And she said, well, your brain works differently than others. And so if you wanted to drive, it might take a very long time. I really wanted that freedom of being able to drive and to have that big accomplishment in my life. And so I took home the manual from my school. I got an 18 out of 19 on my permit, and then I did 9 months of driving lessons, and now I'm a licensed driver.
It is a myth for people with Down syndrome.
Not athletic.
It's a myth that people with autism don't have feelings.
It's a myth that people with ADHD can't carry a conversation.
It is a myth that people with autism cannot live independently.
It is a myth that people with autism can't hold a job.
Just like you, some of us lack self-confidence. Just like you, some of us wish that we had more friends.
Just like you, some of us feel alone in the world.
I think no matter what, if you know in your guts this is what you're supposed to do, try not to let those other voices get in your head, right? Try not to always focus on the negative. And really, there's no limit. Like, impossible is nothing. You can do anything you want.
And it's our job as representatives of the sort to prove that we can do, that we can succeed, and that the people are capable.
As you look at that film, we hope that you take into consideration the impact of low expectations on students. And we hope that we find ways to focus on their strengths and assets, not their limitations and liability. We hope we focus on empowering youth. This video is available on the California Transition Alliance website. And we also have a guide to having discussion points that are available for using with different audiences. The discussion points are also in the Padlet. Next slide. The final point we're going to make in this part is the challenge of developing hope and confidence. Laderick Horn is a national speaker, and he wrote the book, Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities. And he talks about how when you have a disability, if you accept the disability, you move towards self-discovery. If you're unwilling to admit you have a disability, you experience shame. With acceptance comes ability to use supports. Unwillingness causes a rejection of supports. Acceptance leads to self-advocacy. Unwillingness leads to non-adaptive behaviors. Acceptance leads to connecting with people. Unwillingness leads to risking underachievement. And this is evident when students get ready to go to college. 60% of them do not mention that they have a disability or seek accommodations in the environment, especially those with hidden disabilities. So we really need to work real hard on helping them develop the confidence that they need to empower themselves to make plans and enjoy their future. Next slide. There are a lot of resources in the Padlets, and we hope that you take the time to explore them. And the last slide. I'd like to introduce Liz Zastro. She's a program specialist with Lodi Unified School District, and she's going to talk about when we start beginning that transition process. I hope in the first part of this, we've come to the realization that 16 is way too late. So Liz, take it away.
Thank you, Sue. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I have one of the best topics to share. I just want to start with saying, as an Alliance board member, I hope you tune into all of our webinars and return to school with some renewed excitement for secondary transition. We have some great things to share over the next week. So over the course of last school year, we realized as a district, in order to truly prepare our students as they transition out to the world of work and onto college opportunities and community leisure experiences and, learning to live as independently as possible, we needed to start that dialogue and discussion long before, as Sue said, the mandated age of 16. We concluded that these discussions should begin in our district for all students at preschool, raising those expectations for all of our students and expanding inclusion opportunities for all. And you'll find this starting early on page 7 of the basics. Next slide. Whoops. Can you go? I might have messed this up. Hang on. Okay, I'm going to move it up. Can you go to one more slide? I think I might have put them in the wrong order. Do you have the matrix? Sorry, go back. I must have missed one. Go further up then. Sorry, for some reason I don't have this matrix. So I will put it in the Padlet. For some reason the matrix isn't here.
Liz, I think it was earlier. If we go up a couple slides.
Okay, sorry about that.
Is that it? One more.
There it is.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, sorry. We love it. Isn't this great? We can all work together. So Lodi Unified was given the opportunity to explore what would we do if we could change our secondary transition services in our district. I thought they were pretty great, but what would it look like if we could develop a program that would meet all of our current needs and all of the transition areas that Sue was talking about? So what would that look like if we could dream? So on July 1st in 2018, so it's not quite been two years, Lodi entered into what we call the Student and Systems Change Pilot with the California Department of Education and the California Department of Rehabilitation, which we're going to refer to as DOR. So we changed our 5 secondary transition programs that all focus on preparing students to enter into the world of work and provide work-based learning and paid work experience in the community. We opened our doors under one name called Lodi Career Connections, and we refer to this as in front of the curtain, we opened as Lodi Career Connection, and then behind that curtain we had multiple funding streams. So this is our program maintenance matrix, and it's a way to provide services and activities to all of our students and sort of to keep track of what each student is working on. And it's based on all of our 5 DOR student services, and it really is a crosswalk of all of our grant and contracts behind the curtain, right? So such as our Workability One, which is a grant through CDE, and our Transition Partnership Program, the contract with DOR. And paid internship program comes through your local regional center. If anybody would like this matrix, we can put it in the Padlet. I just thought of that. So we'll put it in the Padlet if there's something that you would like to have the whole matrix. And it's really flexible per grade and age, but it has worked well for our program. It's worked well for us. It also was a way for us to quickly move to distance learning. I think it was made easier, and we were able to see what each student has completed for the year and then start at that point. So this is a way that we combined all of our programs under Lodi Career Connection. Next slide. Now we're cooking. So we thought, what a wonderful experience we are providing for our students. We're able to provide intensive employability soft skills. We have the goal of providing a person-centered planning for all students. We're working on student-led meetings. We are doing self-advocacy lessons. We're learning to report your wages if you're on Social Security incentives. Certainly with the goal to help students earn a living wage or a family living wage as adults. Here we were thinking, man, imagine where a student could be if we could start on that matrix at age 14, go through all of those intensive activities all the way through the matrix activities until graduation or they exit our system. They would have so many skills, and they certainly would be able to move into competitive integrative employment. Next slide. So while I was working with a 14-year-old student and thinking about starting a person-centered plan and teaching the student how to lead your IEP, you know, it just hit me. We should have started teaching these skills at an earlier age. And this is a couple years back. And if we had started talking with families about working earlier, imagine the skills the students would bring when they came to our transition program at 14. Imagine the student-led conferences that you could do maybe at elementary school. We were linking soft skills for what employers were looking for starting at preschool. What if we were teaching self-advocacy and leadership skills at an earlier age? Would we still have families worried about their child going to work when we're putting them on work experience and being on SSI if we would have taught the parents earlier how to report wages and work through that agency? So this discussion that we were talking about and thinking about, it became a district discussion. And then we did a board meeting presentation about this topic. And then, of course, we were talking with our colleagues locally and statewide and looking at state leadership discussion. We had a discussion with Kristen Wright, our State Director of Special Education. And we talked with our regional center and our local DOR office. And, you know, I have to say over the last couple of years, it is currently really a national discussion and a trend. And the discussion's been happening, I think, everywhere over the last couple of years. I once heard a speaker say that we expect parents to accelerate from 0 to 60 at 16 years old when we are mandated to begin transition planning. We want parents to loosen the strings and let their child fly and become more independent or go out to a paid job in the community. But parents need time to grow on this as well, and starting early would give them that time. Parents have shared that, you know, with me at meetings that they don't feel their child could go to work, and by high school they did not have these expectations. So what if we would have been having these discussions earlier? Next slide. So in Lodi Unified, we took this slide to the school board when we were presenting our preschool expansion grant. And this was certainly made it clear to our community what the expectations for all students were in our district. And I have to say the board voted unanimously on this as a goal for all students in our district. And the board was so excited about the concept. And many of the members, school board members, asked to be on our planning advisory board. It was well received. So we are linking our preschool to our secondary transition programs with the same kind of goals. Next slide. So this is what our district team has been working on this past year. And we want to thank Solano County Office of Ed for sharing this with us and allowing us to modify for Lodi's use. You can Google Connect to Careers and find a great resource with goals and lesson plans for each grade level K-12. And I'm thinking as I'm talking, we could probably also, I'll get permission, we could put this in the Padlock as well. It's a great resource. So we, you know, Liz has to add things. So we added the preschool readiness and we added the young adult preparation at the end. And this is now our focus for providing guidance and resource of mapping to employment beginning early. So now we're really truly looking at mapping from preschool all the way to the young adult. Not every district wants to start at preschool. Some are starting at kindergarten and some are starting with the infant program, more of a cradle to employment plan. Next slide. So how do we develop skills and interests in early childhood? Parents who read to their children help them love to read. We build on children's inherent characteristics. Sue Sawyer likes to share that her 3 children were showing potential career characteristics early. One son always chose to hang out with his dad and fix things around the house. He is now a skilled carpenter. Her other son was very adventurous, a risk taker, and he is now a chief of a fire department. Her daughter was creative, loved trying new things, and she really is the entrepreneur of the family. She easily finds employment. She is always sharing with us how she is always sharing with us how her aspect of job searching has changed. Her last interview, she videotaped the answers to the question and emailed them back to the company. And I'm hearing that more often. So as we look at children, what toys do they like to play with? Can give you hints about their future careers. Starting early gives you a better indicator of their career pathway. Helps to make career pathway connections. And we want to start early to build certainly those academic skills. You know, soft skills that employers are looking at, like being on time and communication and a team player, making decisions, those leadership skills, creativity, problem solving, time management, and positive attitudes. Those are all things in that employability soft skills that employers are always looking for. And we can work on these skills early. Think about these soft skills as you look at each of the grade levels that are really being taught. And we just might call it something different. Next slide. So in elementary, we can begin to develop career awareness and employability skills, and certainly a focus on the core academics, which classes that they take spark an interest. We certainly can look at those as we're home now watching our students learn. The exploration of hobbies and their recreation activities. And what about volunteering at elementary school or odd jobs that a student could do? Next slide. So in the classroom, we can bring in speakers and have career fairs, and these can be at your elementary age. They could shadow an employee at a job site. Currently, I've seen elementary virtual job shadows that you could do right now. You could visit a college, could also be virtual, or you could assign students interviews to learn about jobs. There's a lot we can do. Next slide. High school, we are definitely more familiar with assisting students in choosing a career pathway and preparing students for a career. And they're sort of similar activities as the others, but just at a different level. Next slide. And high school provides the opportunity to expand student activities in the community with really various paid and unpaid learning experiences. And this has a really great reflection of all the things that you can do. Next slide. So Joey Travolta has been a friend of the California Transition Alliance really for many years. He wanted to share some words of encouragement to teachers. And I think in this distant learning that we're doing currently, we're all teachers, right? So this is dedicated to everyone on the call. He made this for us today. So could you please roll the video?
Hi, I'm Joey Travolta, creator of Inclusion Films, which is a practical film workshop that trains adults that are neurodiverse in filmmaking. I also run filmmaking camps for children that are neurodiverse all over the country. And back in 2015, the California Transition Alliance hired me to keynote speak. And the speech was about a documentary that we made called Lights, Camera, Independence, where we followed 6 of the students from the adult program around all summer as they applied what they learned by working at the film camps. They did camera, they did electric, they did grip, they did editing, and they got per diem, and they got to stay in hotels, and they traveled all over the country. Now, from that speech, not only did I speak, but I had the subjects of the film come as well and speak about their experience. And from that, I got asked to speak all over the country. I was in Florida, I was in Arkansas, Oklahoma, all that stemmed from that one speaking gig. People wanted to know about how filmmaking related back to work. And this showed how important what they learned, and when they were given an opportunity, that they could do that. They could do that work. So I'm really excited to be able to speak to you guys and give you some encouragement, because right now this is a crazy time. It's a really, really crazy time. And when we think about the isolation that most of our special ed students go through in everyday life, we're getting to feel a little bit what that's like to be isolated and to be alone. As teachers, we're always looking for that teachable moment. Well, this is the most teachable moment that we're ever going to have. mean, this is a crazy set of circumstances, but you as teachers, special ed teachers, you're rising above that. And I'm so excited to be associated with you and so proud to be, I mean, I was a special ed teacher a long time ago, and I feel like I'm still a part of that community with teaching filmmaking now, but I'm so proud of you guys, and you're all doing a great job. So remember, when you're planning your teaching, it's never too early to introduce work skills. Work skills are so...
Speaking of work, those dishes aren't going to wash themselves.
Come on, I'm talking to my friends here.
You have friends?
I do. I do. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Hi, I'm Joey Travolta.
Next slide.
Creator of Inclusion Films, which is a practical...
Thank you. He does have friends. Joey's a great guy. Next slide. Joey's a great guy, and we thank him for being able to do that. And you will not believe he's calling me on the phone at this very minute. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you, Joey. So many of the activities teachers are already doing, right? They're already doing employability skills. We may just be calling it something different, and you know, if you look at like noting the concept of putting away your toys and playing together nicely and coming when called and learning to communicate are all employment soft skills. These are skills that employers are definitely looking for. So we just are calling that connecting the dots. Next slide. So I love this, where we're asking students what's important to them and what do they want to do. I do have to point out that the little girl on the far right is PJ. She completed our adult program in Lodi, and all she ever wanted to do for her work experience was to work for Lodi Unified. From a little girl, she wanted to work for us. And I do have to say she's completing her 6th full-time year with us. Doing a great job. Next slide. So we're calling this linking, again, connecting the dots. And these are ideas that came from our teachers. It's a great start. I love the idea of the students addressing the cards and envelopes and mailing them out. It's almost a lost skill. We're asking the mail lady to come visit the class would be really fun and concrete for the students. So again, your teachers are going to come up with some great ideas. Next slide. And there are many, many ideas. I asked another teacher for some elementary ideas, and she came up with these. You know, at some point, I'd love to host a meeting for those excited about this concept and share ideas. I was thinking for this, connecting with a local business and learning about all of the jobs they have would be a great activity, or having the business adopt a classroom and share work skills and talk about what students are going to have to do at work and those kinds of things. Next slide. So here are some employability skills that we work on our secondary transition programs. And we've really talked about these a little bit. These are sort of the soft skills and some of the soft skills that we work with. So then next slide, we had a teacher in our program specialist for our district. She made a preschool soft skills grid. And I think these are just as exciting, and she just turned those same things into like stopping and starting when asked, and fine motor skills, and line leader, following directions, etc. Next slide. So this is another preschool activity and primary activity we did with teachers, and all of these definitely are leading to work and employment skills, and it's really nice to be able to lay them out and show teachers the things that they're doing are basic employability skills. Next slide. So there's more work skills connected for the preschool and elementary, and you can certainly take any of these and adapt them as you want. Next slide. And this is one more of our activities. So we actually presented this concept to 80 preschool staff this year. It was very well received. I'd say from our district and across the state, I probably get a call a week from districts looking to implement some of these early start ideas. Next slide. And so person-centered planning is a very important part of secondary transition planning. This is the one that we use in Lodi that we ask all students to start this process, looking at the skills they bring to the workplace and what are their interests, hopes, and dreams, and what kinds of strengths and accommodations they have. And then this is the one that we developed for preschool. We did a preschool child-centered plan, has a photo of them, things they like to do, circle things that they're good at and things that they need help with. So I really love to look at these side by side and compare the two. It's, I think, great. Next slide. And then also in the resource in the Padlet, we have resources for early start. There are two graphs that I just wanted to point out to you. These two, one is preparing youth for college, career, and life success on page 40, and cradle to employment and adulthood is on page 41. Next slide.
Liz, I just wanted to, for anyone who joined late, that the page numbers are from the Transition Planning Basics 2020 on the California Transition Alliance website.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and thank you. So I would, it's my pleasure to introduce a colleague and a great friend, Vicki Shad. Vicki is a retired SELPA director and assistant superintendent for Glenn County Office of Ed. She's currently teaching at California State University, Chico, as a professor in the area of teaching credentialing. So Vicki, take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. We're really pleased, as both Stu and Liz have said, that you've chose to join us and hone your skills or just add a new trick. You know, every presentation, if you just pick up one new gem, it's always worth it. Before we go to this last section of our presentation today, or our webinar, I want you just to take 30 seconds and do whatever you need to. Don't leave, but do whatever you need to do. Give yourself a neck roll, hand massage, shoulder roll, side-to-side stretch, a foot rotation, wiggle in your chair, and then we'll get started, okay? Next slide. Again, thank you, Liz. What a great segue to our next topic. And we're going to be talking about student-led IEPs, and it's never too early to start, as we just learned. Wasn't that puzzle with the early soft skills for preschool, our work skills, wasn't that great? Liz really took the lead in the state when being thinking about starting at preschool. That's not something many people have thought about, or maybe they've thought about but weren't able to create that connection or make something happen with it. And so she's done a really nice job of moving us on down the road. Next slide. So here are some things that we know about self-determined people, okay? We know that self-determined people are able to set goals. We know they can make decisions. They can see options. They solve problems. They speak up for themselves. They understand what supports are needed for success, and they know how to evaluate the outcomes. So we have, what a great opportunity. We have such a natural setting to be able to help students to develop those self-determination skills through student-led IEPs. There are many ways you can do it, but today what we're talking about is student-led IEPs. And so they can have the skills, the behaviors, and attitudes to increase their likeliness of being a self-determined person. Next slide. Okay, so this just goes a little bit more depth, you know, and it talks about the IEP team having the opportunity to help them develop the self-advocacy skills that they need, the workplace, the community after they leave high school. Students need to leave school with an understanding of their disabilities. They need to know when, if, and how they should disclose the information. They need to know what accommodations they need and how to accommodate themselves first, how to ask for them. Student-led IEPs are a way to start this dialogue and development. Next slide, please. Okay, so they may come by different names, and in your area, It could be called a lot of things. Often we hear student-led IEPs, we hear student-driven IEPs, we hear self-directed IEPs, and we also hear person-centered planning. I didn't put that on there because at the next webinar, you're going to hear more about person-centered planning, which really is the underpinning to do a successful student-led IEP. So they come by many names, but they all have the same goal. So whatever they're called in your area. Okay, we're going to do our poll 3 here. All right. I think the question's going to pop up in just a second. Okay, so could you take a minute here and put and respond? Do you involve your students in their IEP? They don't have to lead them, but do you involve them in your IEP? It doesn't matter what grade, what population you're working with. Just want to know if you involve them.
We'll give people just a sec to vote.
Oh, yay. That is wonderful news. Wonderful news, the amount of you that responded and your responses. That's good. So you're going to see in a little while, we're going to ask you to put some ideas in chat, and we'll share those out when we get them. Okay. All right. So as Sue mentioned earlier, those little icons on the right, they take you to the most recent, or they reference the most recent book, our secondary transition basics book, the one for 2020. Now, it's been put in chat, the link. You can get it on our website, and you can download it as well, and then I'll talk more about it. But I'm specifically looking at 7A and 7B. So 7A talks about the compliance requirements and inviting the child, making sure the child's needs are taken into account, looking at their strengths, their preference, their interests. It's where you do backward mapping. So, you know, we tend to think about, okay, they're reading at the 3rd grade level, we're going to get them to the 4th grade level, they're going to get through this class, they're going to do that. When really what we're trying to do is to see what do they want to do as adults and what experiences can we give them each year. And we'll be talking more about that in a future webinar. And then 7 is the best practices. So 7 has a lot of great things on it. The 4 ways students can be involved in their IEPs, definition of self-advocacy, characteristics of self-determined people, a little bit more than what we had on that slide with the little green car. And then in the bottom, employ self-advocacy. Don't you love this manual? It is so good. Sue has been, like she said, she's been the one compiling this since 2013. She always keeps us current and on what the cutting edge is. And if you choose to download the book, the whole book has, when you get to the mandates, has the mandate on one side and the best practice and resources on the other. And what a nice way. You could, I'm not doing a commercial for the Alliance, but you also can buy it. It's listed under the products on our website, along with a couple other products, but it's up to you. But if you do download it and you put it together, make sure you copy it in a way that you can get the mandate on one side and the best practice on the other. Next slide, please. Okay. This is, it's called imdetermined.org, and their website is in the basics book as well as in the Padlet. This is just another way that you can help students be involved in their IEP. We like it because it's simple, it's straightforward. You're always using student language in their voice on my strengths, my interests, my preferences, my needs. So this is an example, but if you go to their website, you'll see a lot of really great resources. And we have been lucky enough to meet the people from this organization and to hear a lot about the work they're doing and the success they're having and what they're sharing with all the rest of us. Next slide, please. Oh, adult roles. Are you an A or are you a B? All youth need allies. And as you saw the cover of our basics booklet, and Sue explained about the 3 words that are on it. Youth need from us, they need availability, and they need credibility, and they need to know that they have us as an ally. And a lot of times we may think that our behavior is that, or it's neutral, when for the youth it may not be. That may not be what they're hearing from us. So the more that we can help them learn to advocate for themselves by supporting them, by giving them guidance and assistance, they're going to be more likely to become a better self-advocate and have more confidence and better self-esteem in what they're doing. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one talks a little bit about the invitation versus the student-led IEP. So we all know that the invitation is mandated before their 16th birthday, way too late. And you can invite them and put them on the invite at a much younger age, or you can just have them come and present a piece of it. But it really is helpful. They can share a transition assessment, they can share information, career counseling, and this can all be done indirectly by another member of the IEP team, but it's not nearly as effective. Okay, and then students, we want them to develop self-advocacy skills. We want them to understand their disability. We want them to know how to accommodate and how to get accommodations. And so it's a great way, IEPs or meetings are a great way to be able to develop those skills in a natural setting. It's like we're working with a net and they're getting opportunities that they wouldn't get before they leave high school. Next slide, please. Okay, so this, let's see. Okay, so on these, as you're looking at these, feel free to add any principles that you would like to in chat, or if you have any questions about these. So start at young. What age is the correct age? You just heard Liz talk about preschool. I know people that think it should be birth, and some early work out of the area of San Diego 20 plus years ago, they were starting at infant. The youngest I've been a part of one in was, it's hard because I want to read the chat too, is the youngest I've been involved in was in second grade, and the child was sharing, the teacher had all the children in their class that could share their math progress goal, or their tracking of their math goal and what they were doing. So you want to have the student contribute the biggest part of the whole that they can handle. What do I mean by that? So depending when you went through teacher education, some people believe you teach part, then you put it together and teach the whole. Other people believe you teach the whole and then you break it down and teach the part. All right. This thinking is that you give them as much of the pie as they can handle. Okay, so like say, I'm going to use a sports example. Say that you're teaching them to play basketball. Okay, so some people would teach all the different skills and then play a game. Some people would play a game and then back out the skills. But some people would play a modified game based on the skills that the kids can handle. And so it's looking at it individually with each student and giving them the biggest part of the whole that they can handle, which we're going to talk about more on the next page, and then increasing their participation every year. You need to prepare them ahead of time and not throw them in there. You know, often IEPs have not been a positive experience for their family. You know, how many times through the years, not so much anymore, I hope, but did we hear parents say, why do you remind me every year on their birthday that they have a disability? So you need to prepare them and you need to protect them at the meeting, okay? So the IEP team members need to address the youth. Instead of talking about them, talk to them. And so sometimes that means being an advocate yourself and sharing that, excuse me, sorry about that, is sometimes that means that you have to step up and ask others at the table and redirect them to talk to the youth. And that's not always comfortable. But when we do that, when we don't do that, what are we saying to that youth? What are we saying about what we're telling them is important? And how are others ever going to change? Or are we just passively accepting that that's the way people do it? So it's really important. I want you to think about that. No matter what your role is in the IEP, you have a responsibility to stand up and say, could you please talk to Sarah? Instead of talking about her, she's here with us at this meeting. Not always comfortable, hard to do, hard to get people to do, but it's really important. Be a guide on the side during the moment. Be a guide on the side during the meeting. Remind the team of the purpose of the meeting. It's not a time for the assistant principal to commandeer the meeting for discipline or attendance. It's not a time for a parent conference with yourself or any of the general ed teachers. You can set those things up at another time, and you have to be able at the meeting to say, you know, we're here to look at William's progress. We're here to look at his strengths and weaknesses, his needs, his goals for the future, and what he's going to do in the future. I'd be glad to set up a parent conference, or if the vice principal would be glad to call you to talk about his discipline record or his attendance record. Again, as adults, as an ally, we have a role and a responsibility to do those things. Start with annual IEPs. You can do them for all IEPs. I've had seen some really powerful ones for behavioral IEPs when behavior challenges were going on, but start with annuals. And if you seem to have some reluctance you want to set that expectation. Most families come to their kid to open house if their kids are presenting. So most families will have someone there if they know their child is going to be, or youth is going to be presenting at the meeting. But what you have to do is kind of change the status quo. So you need to let those involved know that the meeting's going to look differently, that you're using IEPs for an instructional purpose, and that how they'll be run isn't what they're used to. Okay. Develop it across the population and grade span. It can be done with all students in all spans. The paradigm shift on the purpose, the structure, and the practice of IEP meetings. It's not just a time to fill out a form. It's not just a time to complain about missing assignments, right? Those things all have a part. Create a culture of self-advocacy and person-centered planning. And I'll tell you, some students really like to be able to tell the adults when it's their turn to talk and when it's not, and when they get done. So it's a big deal, but it starts with you. Thank you. Okay, the 5 levels we typically see is the student information is shared indirectly based on a questionnaire or survey or something that was done prior to this. You want to do that as your last resort, okay? That should not be your first option or the norm. And from the survey that I saw, I'm thinking it's probably not the norm. So you also, then maybe you might have a student who's a passive observer. They've got their hoodie on, they're not looking up, they're maybe looking out the window, but they're in the room. And then you have a participant, kind of your reluctant participant, who will answer your questions, but that's it. They might take their hoodie off, they might look at you, they might not, but they'll answer. And then you move to where you're having the self-advocate share information about their needs. They answer and ask questions, they initiate conversation, and it looks. And then the final level, and you don't always get to the final level with every student, but you can get some of it. And it's demonstrates the leadership skills, does more of the talking than anybody else. And I've heard teachers say, if it's really a student-led IEP, the student does more talking than anyone else. And I would agree with that. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Samples of ways to involve students. So you can have them introduce themselves. People will say, oh, you can't have them introduce others because they're not going to know everybody's names, or it'll make them too nervous. Well, why not ask them to ask everyone at the table to introduce themselves and to tell how they are connected to the youth? Then they don't have to remember everybody's name. Use an agenda with a script or notes. Some people need a script. some people, after they've done it for a couple years, don't need a script, need notes, but it's always good to have an agenda, and a script is really helpful. Share a work sample, a progress chart, their strengths. They might share some transition activities. Maybe they've had a workability placement. Maybe they've done on a Department of Rehab or TPP industry tour. Maybe they've done a career assessment. They can share any of those things. Share a goal they have for the future. Explain their needs and how they accommodate for themselves and what kind of accommodations they need in school, community, or work. And they thank everybody for coming. Have them thank everybody for coming and ask everyone to sign their IEP. Now, sometimes people will say parents don't want them there or the student doesn't want them there, but start somewhere. Even if it's only for part of it, start somewhere, okay? And again, if you go back and you look on the book, you will see some really good examples in 7A and 7B of the basics book. All right, we're gonna, I want you to put down ideas of other examples of how you involve youth in your IEPs in the chat room. All right, and if we get to the chat now or later, we'll go over them. But please share any ideas that we haven't talked about, or ones that we've talked about and you like a lot, or ones that haven't worked for you. Just share in the chat how you involve students in them. Next slide, please. So why do them? Okay, why do student-led IEPs? Well, it increases the students' communication skills. It creates ownership in their IEP, in their life, their planning. Creates oral language skills. Develops confidence, self-esteem, self-advocacy. Provides an environment to practice needed transition skills before they leave. So it's working with a net. So it's a safe environment, and kids can take risks because you've set that environment up to be safe, and that they can do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have to look here. Okay, so you have to take the first step, and it sounds like a lot of you have, is you've heard it said by many teachers, it's not more time, it's just a different use of time. And I believe with that. Setting an expectation and building it into your practice. So I know one particular county that has it as an interview question. So all the teachers that they interview for middle school and high school, they're asked to question if they're familiar with student-led IEPs, and if they're not, and if they have any difficulty implementing them. And actually, people had not been hired in that SELPA based on that question, because they thought it was just a bunch of hooey and just needed to fill out the document. So setting the expectation and building it into your practice at many different levels. And then bring others along with you. And that last word should say go, not on. So just do it, start somewhere, it makes a difference. Next slide. Okay, so in the palette, you also have a two-sided document that's how many plans does one person need. And it talks about anywhere we can integrate plans is good, but there are a lot of plans for people that they have to have. And so the front page talks about getting ready, researching, acting, communicating their plan, some hints to prepare to speak and act. The second page has things like disability information on it. As you're teaching them about their disabilities, do you have allies helping them identify who the allies are in their support team or group, legal rights, portfolios, tools for self-advocacy, and some tools and resources. When you go to the palette, it's just a nice two-page document to print out and be able to use with youth as you're preparing them for their future and for their IEP meetings. Next slide, please. Transferable skills. Okay, so we're helping them become more self-determined, to have that confidence, to develop that advocacy, to know how to speak for themselves, know their disabilities, know what they need to be successful. So some other things. I know a lot of charter schools and some traditional schools that have the kids lead their parent conferences. It's starting like at 4th grade. They'll need these skills for job interviews, applying for colleges or trade schools. If they're applying for a scholarship and there's an application process or a video clip they need to submit. Meetings with other agencies or businesses. If they happen to be have a connection to behavioral health, their child and family meetings, they'll be able to participate more actively in those. CPS, they have child and family meetings as well, and the student will be better prepared. If they're on probation, they might have some court appointments that these skills will help them with. Their CASA, if they're a CASA, a student with a CASA advocate, that'll allow them to communicate better with them. And life, and the list goes on as to why these skills that we're teaching in the IEP are so much. So thank you, and we're going to watch the video now. It'll take us just a minute. It's a PSA self-advocacy PSA, and then we'll come back and do a little bit more.
Quiet. Filmmaking is about communication, and if we're all talking amongst each other, we don't hear what's going on. My name is Joey Travolta. We're going to create a PSA about self-advocacy, but I want you guys to answer those questions, talk about advocacy and what it means to you and what you want to get out of it. We're going to split you into the two groups.
So who are we making this for? So if we're making a film for self-advocacy, who are we making it for?
Teaching the skill to someone how to advocate for themselves, for you not doing it for them, but teach the skill for having them do it for themselves.
My questions are interesting that people want to see are the questions that provoke emotions. Because disability is a very broad subject, right? There's 100 different PSAs we could do about disabilities.
If you had one goal you would say in your life?
To pursue a career in healthcare, and the other goal is I want to wear a free coach. I like the bowl.
We're doing this specifically for self-advocacy for adults with disabilities. So
we're talking to them, letting them know that they have a voice.
Exactly.
A lot of my friends bully me because I have a disability. It might be hard to kind of find the things to say.
All right, give me the overall concept first, and then you guys can read it, okay?
So it's about finding your voice.
Okay.
And knowing what your strengths and your abilities are.
Okay, and that's what the PSA is about.
Correct.
And then you're going to read it to me now?
Yes.
Is that what you're going to do?
Correct.
All right, each of you have a part in this?
Correct.
Okay. So who starts?
Me.
Well, who does?
Youth have the power. Your face is I'm sorry. Okay. Youth.
I want to be on Broadway. I want to bowl 300.
My skills are folding napkins, setting up the restaurant. I could run a restaurant someday.
what advice can you give to someone who needs to self-advocate?
My advice is study up and spud it up. Meaning, if someone thinks you don't know something, study up on a whole bunch of topics and then talk circles around it. Like, yeah, I got this, because you got this. We all do.
I will find my voice on The Voice.
I will find my voice on My Voice in LA.
Oh, but what are you changing the script? I want to find my voice on The Voice.
Yes.
Youths have the power to lead their own way.
Did you say youths or youth?
I will not stop until I find my voice.
I will not stop till I find my voice.
We will not stop until we find our voice.
Good, and cut.
I can do this. Take one.
My whole life, I've been told what to do. Where to go, when to do it, and why I should do it that way.
I have a disability.
I have a disability.
It doesn't mean I can't think for myself.
I mean, who knows me better than me?
I want to work.
I want to go to college.
I want to contribute. I want to help create my own path.
I can do this. I can do this.
I can do this.
I got this.
self-advocacy. It's more than just a concept.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? It seems as though we have lost some of the audio, but luckily we are right at the end. So resources that are available to you at the California Transition Alliance website. You can go to the website. You can access the Transition Basics 2020 updated version of that resource. And then the videos that were shown today, you can also access from the homepage on their website. We would also like to remind you that we have registration on the Padlet. You can register for the upcoming 6 webinars, weekly webinars. They are planned from 3 o'clock to 4:30. I'd like to take this time to extend our appreciation to Liz and Vicky and Sue. Next week, we will be focusing on transition assessments. So please register and join us. We will also have the recording from this webinar uploaded onto the Padlet shortly. Thank you all for attending, and we will see you hopefully next week. Thank you so much.